step dancing on the roof. It's like they're calling out, don't lose your youth, 'cause I can stay inside and tap away inside. Oh,
Hello everybody, and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to start it off with a question. Have you guys ever dreamed of living abroad or even traveling? I'm happy to report that I have lived in 3 different countries aside from America, and 2 of those countries being in my adult life. Now, living in these places has taught me quite a bit. A lot of people talk about the benefits of traveling, and one of those benefits being gaining new perspective. But what is it really? You gain new perspectives by broadening your scope, and you see how people live their daily lives completely different from what you thought it could ever be. Some people, they don't depend on some of the modern amenities like washing their clothes in a washing machine or even using the internet. And some of those things I saw here living in Vietnam. But in a different video, I'm gonna be talking deeper about some of the perspectives, cultural differences, so on and so forth in another video. So be sure that you subscribe to my channel to watch that video. Now, what this video is gonna be mainly about are some of the things that I've learned along the way to make traveling or moving abroad easier and simpler. So these are some of the things that I learned along the way and some things that I wish I would have known before I moved. So hopefully you guys will find this video helpful if you do plan on moving and living abroad or even traveling. So the first thing you have to do when deciding where to go is, of course, decide where to go. But it's not just as simple as looking at pictures and seeing, ooh, this place is beautiful, or ooh, this place has waterfalls or beaches. I can go here and there and take so many glamorous photos for Instagram. That's not what you usually want to look for if you're looking for a place to stay long term. What you would like to look for are things that you value. So do you value having a safe space? Do you value having affordable healthcare? Do you value being able to see family easily and having hiking trails, things like that? So what are you really looking for? When I first moved to Canada, one of the deciding factors was, of course, healthcare. I wanted affordable healthcare. If something happened, I didn't want to be stuck in deep, deep debt. And that was one of the amazing things about Canada, because within the first 3 months I was there, I needed a surgery to have my gallbladder out. When they mentioned I had to have surgery, my jaw literally dropped because I thought I didn't meet the minimum requirements. I was like, I can't afford to have surgery. I haven't been here long enough, and I also haven't worked yet. And the doctor laughed at me and she said, well, that's one of the benefits here in Canada, because you have been here long enough, you've met the minimum requirements, and the only thing that you'll have to pay for is for parking. So it was very nice being able to walk out of surgery, well, hobble out of surgery, and only have to pay for the parking. So thank God I decided on Canada. Now, the next thing that I was looking for in a place was language. So I think Canada for me was a really good stepping stone because I didn't want to go too far away from family, but I also wanted to be in a place where I spoke the language because I don't speak any other language, at least not yet. That's why Canada was perfect for me to start off, test the waters to see where I really wanted to be, but also see what I'm capable of. And that is what led me to being open to moving to Vietnam. Now, some of the deciding factors for us here were family. We wanted to be closer to family and have a better support system than we did in Canada. Even though I was sort of close to family there, especially with COVID, it wasn't always an option to see them all the time or as often because it was a really long drive. So we did decide to come to Vietnam to also be closer to David's family and have a chance for me to meet them. Now, settling in any city in Vietnam was not applicable for us because we didn't want to just go anywhere. We wanted to be in a place where I had time to adjust. And so I didn't want to be in a huge, busy city just yet because compared to Canada, I don't think I was ready for that. Even though there are large expats communities here, like in Hanoi or even Saigon, I don't think I would have been able to adjust very well. It would have taken a lot longer than what it has, because those are large cities and they're also really busy and noisy, and I'm not used to that much noise. Even here in the city that we're at, there is quite a bit of noise, and it still surprises me sometimes because at like 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even like 4:30, there's a bunch of music playing, people are getting ready for tournaments, there's cars everywhere, honking. Honking is a lot. And when we traveled to Hanoi and Saigon, I just felt overwhelmed at the sheer amount of noise. And so I'm really glad that we chose the city we did. Another thing that we looked at, and was one of the first things that I asked about, was the safety. How safe is it for me to walk around? Because one, I'm not familiar with anything here. And two, I'm not used to being as vigilant of things like pickpocketing or some of the other things that you really do have to be prepared for. So luckily we did choose this city because there isn't as much of an issue with things like pickpocketing or stealing. So I have felt at ease when walking around by myself. I haven't had a problem with pretty much anything. A lot of people here have been friendly. And in fact, most of the experiences that I've had in Vietnam have been pretty great. That's why I'm really happy we chose the city we're in, because we haven't had to worry about that too much here, as opposed to the larger cities like Hanoi or Saigon. So to sum it all up, think deeply about some of the things that are valuable to you when you're deciding to choose a place to stay long term. Again, don't just look at pictures and decide from there. If you really do want to be happy, then think deeply about this one before choosing a place. Now, the next thing that you have to do to prepare for your move or travel is figuring out the visa requirements. I know this sounds pretty obvious, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult than what you think. No matter how much research and preparation you do, when it comes time to application, sometimes you're gonna need outside help from maybe a travel agency or even a lawyer. And some of it you won't even figure out until you get to the place that you're going. That's what happened to us when we came here to Vietnam, but I'm gonna get to that in a second. So when I first went to Canada, well, before I went to Canada actually, I did a whole bunch of research, and the application was honestly pretty easy. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew what I wanted to apply for and what paperwork I had to fill out. It was pretty straightforward for me. I think this is also because I'm an American, but David, on the other hand, when he was planning to go to Canada as a student as well, he had a longer application process. So he ended up going through an immigration agency, and I was able to do it all by myself online. Now, luckily, Canada does have clear outlines of their visa requirements and also some pretty clear paperwork that you have to fill out. So the application process for that should be pretty easy if you do plan on going to Canada. On the other hand, what was more complicated for us was Vietnam. The application process and the processing times are really good. Like, it's not too bad for tourist visas or a few of the other ones. They're pretty easy to apply to. There's only like one form that you really have to fill out. And for us, what we had to do first to get here was apply for my tourist visa. And tourist visas only last for 30 days. We thought that that would be enough time for us to apply for the second permit, well, visa that I needed to stay here long term. So I needed a 3 to 5 year visa to stay here. And we thought that that application process wouldn't take too long because their processing times said that it takes about a week. But to gather all of the paperwork that we needed and also making sure that we went to the offices on time so they had time to process everything, that was a lot more work, and that took us 2 months to do. And rather than being able to extend my tourist visa, we actually had to do a visa run. That is what they call it here. They call it a visa run because you can't extend your visa and stay within the country. You actually have to apply for another tourist visa, leave the country, and come back in order to validate it. That's what made the process a little bit more complicated, and we ended up spending a lot of time in Ho Chi Minh City to be able to run across the border to Cambodia and come back. Now, the other reason that this whole process took longer, because the city that we're in, I don't think they're necessarily used to dealing with foreign cases like mine. So they weren't necessarily sure about all of the requirements or all of the paperwork I had to have or who was supposed to sign what. We went to a total of, I think, 3 different offices within the city, and then we had to travel to Hanoi twice, which was a 6-hour bus ride. And during this whole process, this is what I meant by no matter how much research you do and no matter how many people you ask, some of the time you're not going to be able to figure it out until you get to where you're going, which is going to definitely be frustrating if you don't speak the language. One thing to be sure to do is do your research. Go to online forums, see what other people are saying about their application process for some of the things that you would like to apply for. So if you're applying for a work permit, it's really easy. Just go to Facebook or a few other online forums and see what people have said about the process. I did a little bit of that before we left, but I wish I would have done more because after I got the right permit, I saw people had talked about the same thing, which would have been very helpful for me to know beforehand, because then we would have known exactly where we were supposed to go and who was supposed to sign what, rather than trying to figure it out, run between offices and do all of this extra work that took a lot of extra time when all I had to do was look it up here and it said exactly what this person went through and what they had to do in order to get the right paperwork. And so we could have showed that to them or talked to them and then they would have been able to do it for us. So definitely check those out. There's quite a few forums that you can find on Facebook, Reddit, people talking about probably the same thing on YouTube. If you check through the comments, I'm pretty sure you can find some of the answers you're looking for. But overall, you might have to be prepared for some curveballs that might be thrown at you. Now, the third thing that you have to prepare for is work, especially if you plan on staying overseas long-term, because you have to be able to afford your lifestyle. I mean, unless you have enough saved up, then lucky you. There are a few things that you can do to make sure that you're able to sustain your life overseas. First, you could make sure that you have a job lined up before you leave. So deciding where you want to go, what city you're going to live in, and making sure that you already have a job when you get there. And the next option you have is finding a job that allows you to work remotely so you're not stuck in one place. There are quite a few websites that post remote job opportunities, and not all of them require experience. Some of them are actually starting positions. So you just have to do a little bit of digging to find the right one for you. I'll leave links down in the description below for some of the websites that I did find. Now, one of the last options that you have is starting an online business. So you see a lot of people talking about, oh, I finally started my online business. And I love it because that's just showing how viable of an option this can be for some of you. So if you're really good at crafting, teaching a skill, these are all options for you and you can actually start an online business. The option that was most viable for us was teaching English online, but we're not going through any of the third-party websites. We're actually just starting our own online teaching business, and this has worked for us very well so far. But one of the flip sides of doing this is, since we're not going through any of the third-party websites, we have a difficult time sometimes finding the right students and making sure that they stay. Payments, all of that stuff is a little bit more difficult because we have to do all of that ourselves. We don't have someone else dealing with it for us. So take into consideration all of these options, look at them carefully, and see what will suit you best. Now, the fourth thing that you have to do is figure out how much you have to save before you leave, because you don't want to be stuck abroad without any means of sustaining your life and waiting for your paycheck to come in. So make sure that you have enough in your savings account or in your bank account to sustain yourself for at least 2 to 3 months. And this is exactly what David and I did to make sure that we were okay. We didn't have to worry about our finances for the first few months we were here. But how we did that was, the first thing we had to do is be frugal. We did not go out to eat takeout pretty much at all for the last few months that we were in Canada. You don't always have to have takeout 6 days a week or go out with your friends 3 days a week for dinner, because that does get expensive, especially if you're planning on leaving. Now, I do know it's important to spend time with friends and family before going, but what you can do instead of going out to eat is cook at home. So make sure to be frugal. Don't waste money unnecessarily. Another thing to do is make sure the food you're buying isn't rotting in your fridge. Use everything you have so you're not going out and buying more. The other thing that you can do is start selling stuff away. You can make quite a bit of money selling the things that you don't need anymore. And this is exactly what David and I did. So the first things we started selling were things within our home, such as decorations, other things we didn't always use, like our blender, coffee maker, or even the toaster. We didn't always use the toaster. So those were the first things that went. We were able to make about $1,500 off of the items within our home. But the big ticket item, we waited until last minute, and that was our car. Well, we didn't necessarily wait until last minute. We actually sold it maybe like a month. Yeah, we sold it about a month before we left. And we were able to make a total of $7,000 before we left, just off of the things that we no longer needed. Now, of course, with this cost, you have to think about the tickets, you have to think about transportation and food. So take into consideration all the costs that you have to spend before leaving. Also think about how much it's gonna cost for the visas, the visa processing, and if you have to go through any type of agency, take into consideration those costs as well, and do all of the calculations to see how much you need before you go. Now, the last thing that you have to do is be prepared to adjust. You have to mentally prepare yourself to adjust to a new life, because there are going to be a lot of cultural differences, new perspectives that are introduced to you, things that might seem odd to you. Maybe you won't understand them at first. No matter how much research you do beforehand, there is still going to be a lot of new things introduced to you when you get there. So for me, no matter how many warnings David gave me about, oh, well, you're gonna have a lot of adjusting to do, you're gonna have a lot of cultural shock, you have to be careful of this and that, there was still so much that I didn't figure out until we got here. One of the things being staring. The first time it happened, it was while we were at the gym. I was doing my regular workout. Somebody comes up to me and is like, just staring for a full set. And I was like, what are you doing? Stop, I'm working out. Because in my head, I'm thinking, okay, it has been drilled in that staring is rude. Drilled into my head for 25 years, staring is rude. So you can't help but feeling awkward. And then I talked to David afterwards and he's like, oh yeah, people here will stare at you because you're a foreigner. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, they're just curious. It's nothing rude here. It's not considered disrespectful or even awkward when people stare. It's gonna happen. Just get used to it. But sometimes, no matter how much I remind myself, oh, okay, it's nothing rude, it shouldn't be awkward, it's still difficult to get used to. Now, if you don't have somebody to talk to you about cultural differences or things that you'll have to adjust to, like I did, then you're gonna have to use observation skills to do this. Now, I didn't always want to depend on David, trying to ask him and have him tell me every single thing. I wanted to use my observation skills, figure it out for myself, and then just have a little confirmation from him later on if I was still confused about it. So one of the things that I use my observation skills for is when we were out with family. This was the best opportunity for me to use my observation skills and figure some of the things out. What I did notice is David was the younger one out of most of his family. Well, he's actually the youngest in his family. So when he was drinking with them, he would make sure to use two hands, okay? You have to use two hands when you're pouring the drink or when you're cheersing. You can't do it with one hand. It's considered disrespectful. You either use two hands, so hold the cup like this, or support your arm like this. So when you're cheersing, you gotta support your arm. You can't just do it one-handed, because if you're the youngest, it is considered rude. And I started imitating that. David noticed and he's like, oh, that's such a good posture. I was like, heck yeah, I got it. Now the next thing he did end up having to tell me, and because I did ask, and he said that my glass would have to be lower than the other person's because I am the youngest, and I learned all of this just by watching how David acted with everybody else. I knew that he was the youngest, and I also knew generally the ages of the other people. So by knowing this and watching, I was able to figure out most of this on my own. Really work on your observation skills, because this is a skill that will save you later on, making sure you're not being, one, disrespectful, but then two, you're not making the situation awkward. And I would also suggest, if you have the opportunity, ask somebody for confirmation about the things that you've observed. So once you have a conclusion, just ask someone, be like, hey, is this why you're doing this? Or Did I get it wrong? Something like that. Just to make sure that you have it correct and that you also have a deeper understanding of it, because if you want to be able to live someplace long-term and build great relationships, then you have to show that you're at least being respectful and trying to learn about some of the cultural perspectives and differences. So this last one will definitely help you during that adjustment period. Now, those are just a few of the things that you need to prepare for your life overseas. I'm going to be releasing more content like this related to travel and life abroad. So if you don't want to miss out on the next video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon. And if you did find this video helpful, be sure to click that like button. That is it for today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.